Hillary Clinton just arrogantly dismissed Senator John Kennedy as a carnival barker on live television, completely unaware that he was about to systematically dismantle her 40-year legacy using a simple Cajun fishing story. Hillary Clinton just called Senator Kennedy a carnival barker in a seersucker suit, straight to the face of a Rhodes Scholar who went to Oxford, graduated from Vanderbilt Law, and has been waiting 20 years to ask her about 33,000 deleted emails. She called him a carnival barker. He asked her about the cloth. The 14th of May, 2025. Hearing Room 216, Hart Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C. The Senate Judiciary Committee convened a special hearing on accountability in federal records management, a title so bland that not a single reporter in the press pool bothered to file an advance piece until the witness list leaked at 7:00 p.m. the night before. Hillary Rodham Clinton, sole witness, and the first questioner, Senator John Neely Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana. Smash that like button right now, because you are about to watch the funniest senator in America ask the most investigated woman in America questions she has been dodging for 30 years. The hand that had signed diplomatic agreements with 112 nations, the hand that had gripped a microphone at 36 presidential and primary debates, the hand that had held the armrest in the Situation Room the night bin Laden was eliminated. That hand came down on the oak surface of the witness table with a single, precise tap, the way a trial lawyer sets a brief on the judge's bench. Hillary Clinton sat upright, dark navy suit, not the hopeful blue of the 2016 campaign, not the power red of her UN addresses. Navy, the color of someone who had stopped trying to persuade and started trying to survive. A single pearl pin on her lapel. One, not two. Just enough to say, I still matter. Without screaming, I still want to be president. The microphone was live. The hearing room lights caught the surface of her reading glasses, the ones she had started wearing publicly after the 2016 election, as though losing had given her permission to admit that her eyes were aging, too. The chairman said a few procedural words. Clinton nodded. The nod of a woman who had sat before congressional committees more times than most senators had ever served on one. She knew the rhythm. She knew the distance from microphone to lips. She knew which C-SPAN camera angle caught her most serious expression. Then Kennedy walked in. Senator John Kennedy settled into his chair the way a Louisiana uncle settles onto a fishing dock. Slow, easy, like he had all day, and the fish weren't going anywhere. Seersucker suit, creased at the elbow just enough, tie a half-inch off-center to the left, not because he was sloppy, but because perfection makes people in Louisiana suspicious. Clinton looked at him, her lips pressed together, not a smile, not a frown, an expression she had practiced for 30 years. I am listening. But I have heard this before. Senator Kennedy, she said, before he could open his mouth, her voice cutting across the hearing room like a knife through butter. Before you begin your carnival barker routine in that seersucker suit, I would like to remind you that I have served this country as First Lady, United States Senator, and Secretary of State. I have sat before 17 congressional committees. I did not come here to hear jokes. The hearing room went quiet. Clinton's aide, a young woman with a neat bun, a Georgetown MBA, who understood that her job was not to advise but to nod, nodded. Kennedy didn't react. He just pulled his glasses out of his breast pocket, cleaned them with a handkerchief, slow, careful, small circles on each lens, the way Boudreaux cleans a hook before dropping it in the water, then put them on. Madam Secretary, he said, his Louisiana drawl pouring out slow as August honey. I appreciate that, and you are right. You do have the most impressive resume of anyone who has ever lost a presidential election. He paused. 1 beat, 2 beats. Long enough for everyone in the room to understand that the next word was coming. twice, behind Kennedy. Senator Mike Lee covered his mouth with his hand, not coughing, but laughing. Kennedy continued, his voice neither rising nor falling, like he was reading a grocery list. You have been First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, two-time presidential candidate. That resume has everything, except the one job you actually wanted. Clinton didn't blink. That was a skill that takes 3 decades to sharpen the ability to hear a projectile pass your ear without flinching. Then smile, as if it were a compliment. She smiled, the political smile, lips pressed tight, eyes not smiling, like an elevator door closing on someone you don't want to talk to. Kennedy let the smile sit there for a moment. Let it do its work. Let it broadcast across C-SPAN to 14 million households. Let the audience at home see exactly what Clinton thought of a senator from Louisiana who talked slow and fished for catfish. Let them see the smile of a woman who had run against Barack Obama and Donald Trump, and 100 senators, and lobbyists, and foreign ministers, and who had decided before Kennedy's microphone was even hot that this man was beneath her. Good. Kennedy needed that smile. The way a fisherman needs a fish to take the bait before he sets the hook. Madam Secretary, I want to be clear about something, Kennedy said. And here, his voice dropped a register, not louder, but deeper. The kind of deep that comes from Oxford tutorial rooms and Vanderbilt law classrooms and the Louisiana State Treasurer's office, where he had spent 8 years counting every penny of a state budget before most of these senators could spell fiduciary. I am not a carnival barker. I am, however, the Rhodes Scholar in this room, and you are the witness. He didn't wait for a response. Didn't need one. The correction was not for her. It was for the 38 million people who would eventually watch this clip and wonder whether the man in the seersucker suit was what she said he was, or what he was about to prove he was. Kennedy opened a book, not a file, not a classified document, a hardcover book, blue spine, white letters, What Happened, the memoir Clinton wrote after the 2016 defeat. He set it on the table gently, like placing an exhibit into evidence, because that is exactly what it was. Madam Secretary, I read your book, read it twice, first time out of curiosity, second time because I didn't believe the first time. He turned pages. He had tabbed them, yellow, blue, red, like a law student preparing for finals. Except this exam wasn't for him. This exam was for her. Page 12, you blamed James Comey. He flipped. Page 24, you blamed Russia. Flipped. Page 41, misogyny. Flipped. Page 58, Bernie Sanders. He was in your party, by the way. Flipped. Page 79, the media. Page 95, WikiLeaks. Page 113, rural voters, the ones you called deplorable. He stopped flipping, looked up. I counted 24 reasons in this book, Madam Secretary, 24 reasons why you lost the 2016 election. He removed his glasses, cleaned them again, the second time, and the hearing room was beginning to realize that the cleaning was his rhythm, the way a guitarist picks before a solo. 24 reasons, and not one of them was, I didn't campaign in Wisconsin. Soft laughter rippled through the gallery, not loud laughter, but the kind that comes out through the nose when someone says the thing you have always thought, but never heard anyone say. Kennedy leaned forward. My friend Boudreaux, he's out in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. Boudreaux lost a fishing tournament last year. Lost bad. Dead last. Out of 47 fishermen, Boudreaux caught the fewest catfish. He looked at Clinton. She didn't move. Boudreaux made a list, too. The water was wrong. The fish weren't hungry. The sun was in my eyes. The boat rocked. The hook was bent. The neighbor's dog barked. 24 reasons. He paused. The breath of the entire room paused with him. Not one of them was, "My bait was bad." Kennedy set the book down. "You know what is the saddest part, Madam Secretary? In 400 pages of that book I read carefully. I am a slow reader. We Louisiana folks do everything slow except eat gumbo in 400 pages. You have got one chapter about Wisconsin. One. And that chapter doesn't say, 'I never set foot in Wisconsin,' said. That chapter says, 'The data showed Wisconsin was safe.' Data." He tilted his head. "Boudreaux had data too. Boudreaux said catfish liked shrimp bait in May. That was Boudreaux's data. Last year, catfish didn't like shrimp bait in May. Boudreaux lost. But Boudreaux didn't write 400 pages, blaming the shrimp." He paused. Boudreaux switched to worm bait. Kennedy looked down at the book, then at Clinton. And in that moment, just a flash, so quick only C-SPAN camera 2 caught it. His eyes were not mocking, not triumphant. Sad, genuinely sad, the way a man looks sad when he watches someone dig a hole for 30 years and they are still holding the shovel. "I don't dislike you, Madam Secretary," he said, his voice softer. "Now, I feel sorry for you, because you have spent 40 years blaming everybody else, and the one person you've never blamed is the one person responsible." Kennedy tapped the book cover. "The definition of entitlement, Madam Secretary, is losing an election and writing a 400-page book about why everybody else is to blame." He tapped again. "Boudreaux lost too. But Boudreaux didn't write a book. Boudreaux changed his bait." The political smile on Clinton's face contracted, didn't vanish, but tightened like a guitar string wound, half a turn too far. Her eyes still didn't blink, but her hand, the right one, moved half an inch across the table, as if searching for something to hold on to. There was nothing to hold. Kennedy pulled out a folder, thin, maybe 20 pages, not the kind of thick dossier that senators use to impress cameras, the kind that is thick enough to be a doorstop. But nobody reads past page 3. Kennedy's folder was thin because he only kept what mattered, like a fisherman who brings exactly 3 lures because he knows what is in the pond. "Madam Secretary, let's talk about emails." Clinton exhaled, soft, almost inaudible. But the microphone caught it. It was the exhale of a woman who had heard this question 4,717 times. She might not have counted exactly, but her body counted. Every time she heard the word email, her shoulders rose 1 millimeter, 4,700 millimeters, nearly 5 meters. Enough to drown in 33,000 deleted emails, Kennedy said, his voice still flowing like honey, but now the honey had a metallic edge. "Private server in the basement of your home in Chappaqua. Not in a government facility, not on a government network. In your basement, between the water heater and the Christmas decorations, if the floor plans are accurate." He let the image land a Secretary of State, running classified communications through a server that shared square footage with holiday wreaths. The absurdity was the point. The casualness was the devastation. BleachBit, military-grade data destruction software, used to wipe it clean, not delete, not move to trash. BleachBit, the kind of software that people use when they don't want the FBI, the NSA, or God himself to read what was on that drive. And when someone asked you about it, you said, he paused, looked at Clinton, waited. She said nothing. What? Like with a cloth? Kennedy read it, his voice flat as a lake at dawn. What? Like with a cloth? He laid his hand on the table. That, quote, Madam Secretary, will follow you to your final resting place. And it should. Silence. Not polite silence. The silence of a hearing room where everyone is replaying that quote in their heads and realizing it still hurts as much as the first time they heard it. My friend Boudreaux, if Boudreaux deleted 33,000 text messages from his phone and then said, "What, like with a cloth?" His wife Marie would divorce him. Kennedy tilted his head. And Marie has put up with a lot from Boudreaux. Marie trusts Boudreaux with her catfish recipes, which is the highest form of trust in Cajun culture. But 33,000 deleted messages? Marie has limits. Laughter in the room, but different this time. Not comedy, laughter, pain, laughter, the kind of laugh that escapes when someone says the thing you didn't want to admit. Kennedy turned a page. FBI Director James Comey, not a fan of mine and not a fan of yours, called your handling of classified information extremely careless. 110 emails containing classified information on an unsecured server. 8 email chains at the top secret, SAP level, the highest classification level in the United States government. He turned again. And here's the new part. Senator Chuck Grassley. Has a patient man, Madam Secretary, more patient than Marie. Senator Grassley discovered that the FBI never finished reviewing all the thumb drives containing copies of your emails. Never. In 2025, there are still thumb drives that have never been opened. Kennedy looked straight at the C-SPAN camera, not at Clinton, at the camera, at the audience at home, at the people watching on phones, in kitchens, in cars, on fishing docks in Breaux Bridge. Vice President Vance asked you a question at a prior hearing. Good question, I have to say. He asked what the difference is between a lance corporal in the Marines who does the same thing and a Secretary of State who does the same thing. The lance corporal is put behind bars. The secretary writes a book. He tapped his finger on the table, light, steady, like counting a beat. I would like to hear the answer too, Madam Secretary. Clinton raised her hand and adjusted her glasses. Slow, careful. Not because her glasses were crooked. Her glasses were never crooked. They were adjusted each morning by an aide who knew the exact distance from frame to temple, but because her hand needed to do something. Her hand needed to move so her brain could buy 3 more seconds. 3 seconds wasn't enough. Madam Secretary, Kennedy said, his voice slower now. Not slow from laziness. Slow from precision. Slow like a surgeon holding a scalpel. Let's talk about Christopher Steele. Clinton didn't move. But her aide, the Georgetown MBA, did. A small movement, her left hand sliding toward the document pile on the table, her thumb creasing a page corner, ready to open. A lawyer isn't always the one who speaks. Sometimes a lawyer is the one who opens the right page. Steele dossier, Kennedy said, the name like reading a menu. No drama, no emphasis, just the dish about to be served. The Clinton campaign paid the law firm Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie paid Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS paid Christopher Steele, a former British intelligence officer. Steele wrote a document based on Russian sources. The same Russia you said interfered in the election. And that document somehow found its way to the FBI. Kennedy raised his hand, counting on his fingers. You paid Perkins Coie 1 finger. Perkins Coie paid Fusion GPS 2. Fusion GPS paid Steele 3. Steele used Russian sources 4. The FBI used that document to obtain a surveillance warrant 5. He looked at his own hand, 5 fingers spread like the hand of a lawyer presenting evidence to a jury. 5 steps, 5 layers of insulation. Enough for you to say, I didn't know at each step, but money always knows the way home. He turned a page. The FBI used that document to obtain FISA warrants, surveillance warrants targeting an American citizen. The Inspector General found 17 errors in the warrant applications, and 17. Not 2, not 3, 17. An FBI lawyer, Kevin Kleinsmith, pled guilty to falsifying evidence in the application. He was put behind bars. Kennedy paused. 17 errors, Madam Secretary. I asked 12 third-year law students at LSU. Not Harvard, not Yale. LSU law students. How many errors in a FISA application is careless, and how many is deliberate? All 12 said, 1 is careless, 2 is suspicious, 17 is scripted. Kennedy removed his glasses. Third time. The hearing room now knew that every time Kennedy removed his glasses, the next thing out of his mouth would be something no bait could survive. You funded a document that became the basis for surveilling an American citizen. That document was discredited. The warrants were flawed. The lawyer who falsified evidence was locked away, and Special Counsel Durham confirmed that your campaign was the funding source. He set his glasses on the table, didn't clean them, just set them down, like setting a gutted fish on a cutting board. Then you went on a podcast in 2019, and you called Tulsi Gabbard, a combat veteran, a National Guard officer, a woman who served 2 deployments in a war zone. You called her a Russian asset. Kennedy leaned forward. Same playbook, different target. Trump, Russian asset. Tulsi, Russian asset. Jill Stein, Russian asset. Anybody who disagreed with you, Russian asset. He stopped, looked down at his hands, then up. Director of National Intelligence Gabbard just opened Senator Schiff's file on live television last week, and the trail leads back to your campaign. Same network, same lawyers, same funding sources. Kennedy let that connection breathe. Schiff, Steele, Clinton, Gabbard, Perkins, Quay. The same thread running through every hearing room in Washington, like a fishing line no one wanted to pull, because nobody knew what was on the other end, until Gabbard pulled it. And what came up wasn't a fish. It was a chain. He leaned back, smiled a sad smile, not a victory smile. In Louisiana, Madam Secretary, when the bait doesn't work, we change the bait. You kept using the same bait, Russian asset, on everybody who disagreed with you. Trump, Tulsi, Jill Stein. At some point, when everybody you don't like is a Russian asset, maybe the problem isn't Russia. Clinton leaned left toward her aide. A small movement, not a full turn, not a whispered huddle, just a lean, like a boat tilting when a wave comes from an unexpected direction. The lawyer instinct when the evidence is bad, find your lawyer. When the lawyer can't help, find the exit. The aide didn't look at her. Her eyes were fixed on the document pile, fingers turning pages, searching for an answer that both of them knew wasn't on any page. Kennedy pulled out a photograph, not a satellite image, not a press photo, a Google Earth printout, decent enough quality, the kind anyone with a laptop and Wi-Fi could print at home. That was part of the strategy. Kennedy didn't use evidence that looked like it came from the FBI. Kennedy used evidence that looked like anyone at home could verify it themselves. Haiti. He said, one word. Let it hang in the air like smoke. After the 2010 earthquake, the international community pledged $4.4 billion to rebuild Haiti. The Clinton Foundation played a central role in distributing the aid. Madam Secretary, your husband was the UN Special Envoy to Haiti. You were the Secretary of State approving aid disbursements. The Clinton Foundation received donations from contractors seeking reconstruction contracts. He set the photograph down. $4.4 billion. Do you know how many homes were built, Madam Secretary? Silence. 6. He let the number hang. 6. $4.4 billion. 6 homes. My friend Boudreaux built a catfish pond. Cost him $4,000. Took 6 months. Produced 200 catfish. Kennedy tilted his head, his eyes free of any mockery. Almost innocent, like a child asking why the sky is blue. Boudreaux has a better return on investment than the Clinton Foundation, Madam Secretary, and Boudreaux doesn't have a staff of 2,000 or a former president as co-chair. Laughter in the room. But Kennedy wasn't laughing. His face was flat, his eyes on Clinton, and the absence of a smile on his face made the statement more terrifying than any accusation. The Caracol factory, he continued, advertised as creating 60,000 jobs. How many did it actually create? A few thousand, most at minimum wage. The Royal Oasis Hotel, built with aid money in a country where people were still living in tents. He looked down at the photograph. You built a luxury hotel in a country where people lived in tent cities. That's not charity. Back home, we call that taking advantage. And the people who get taken advantage of are always the ones who can't afford a lawyer. He turned a page. The FOB system, friend of Bill. WJCVIP. William Jefferson Clinton. Very important person. Those were internal codes in Clinton Foundation emails. Contractors who wanted Haiti contracts were classified by their level of proximity to former President Clinton, not by competence, not by price, by relationship. Kennedy laid his hand on the document pile. And now, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is opening an audit. Every contract, every disbursement, every FOB email, all of it. He looked at Clinton, $4,000 and 200 catfish, or $4.4 billion and 6 homes. I'm no mathematician, Madam Secretary, but I know when the numbers don't add up. He turned one more page, the last page of the Haiti section, and this one didn't have numbers. This one had a photograph. Small, black and white, just enough quality to show a row of tarp tents stretching to the horizon. Port-au-Prince, 2014, 4 years after the earthquake, 4 years after $4.4 billion. Do you know what the Haitian people call your aid system, Madam Secretary? Kennedy asked. And for the first time in the hearing, his voice carried no flavor, no honey, no metal, no humor, no sadness, just flat. Clan, not the infamous historical hate group. Creole, it means robbery in nice clothes. He set the photograph face down on the table, as if he didn't want to look at it anymore. Down in Louisiana, we have a saying, nobody's poorer than a poor man helped by a rich man who wants to be famous. Boudreaux said that, and Boudreaux can't find Haiti on a map. Clinton picked up her water glass, drank, slow, long, not because she was thirsty. Shed had water 15 minutes ago. She drank because she needed time. She drank because when your mouth is drinking, your mouth doesn't have to answer. It's the oldest hearing room technique in the world, and everyone in the room knew she was using it. The glass emptied halfway. She set it down. Her hand stayed on the glass, as if letting go of the glass would leave her hand with nowhere to go. And a hand with nowhere to go in a hearing room is a hand that confesses. Kennedy sat up straight, a small change, a few inches, but the entire room noticed, because for the past 20 minutes, Kennedy had leaned back, tilted his head, cleaned his glasses, smiled, told Boudreaux stories. He had been an entertainer. He had been a storyteller. He had been the Louisiana fisherman with the honey drawl and the hook hidden in the bait. Now he sat straight, and everything else fell away. No more smile, no more drawl, no more Boudreaux, just a man from Louisiana who had served his country in a different way than the 4 men who lost their lives in Benghazi, but who understood what service meant. "I've been telling jokes for 20 minutes, he said, voice flat. No honey, no Cajun, just English, clear like reading names off a headstone. "I'm not going to tell one here because 4 Americans lost their lives. And you asked, what difference does it make?" The hearing room, which had laughed, whispered, shifted in seats for 20 minutes, froze. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Information Officer Sean Smith, 2 CIA contractors, Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty. Kennedy read the names slowly. Each one, not looking at paper, had memorized them. 600 security requests were sent to the State Department in the months before the attack. 600. Not 6. Not 60. 600. He paused. 13 hours from the time the attack began to the time it ended. 13 hours. Tyrone Woods on the rooftop with a laser designator painting targets for air support. Air support that never came. He let that sentence sit. Air support that never came. 6 words. In military operations, a laser designator on a rooftop means one thing: someone believes help is on the way. Tyrone Woods pointed that laser into the sky for hours. He kept pointing it. He kept believing. The sky stayed empty. 13 hours, Kennedy repeated. A man can do a lot in 13 hours. A man on a rooftop with a laser can paint a target for 13 hours and never stop believing that someone will answer. That takes a kind of faith that you don't learn in law school. You don't learn it at Yale. You don't learn it at the State Department. You learn it in the Marines. Kennedy's voice didn't shake, didn't choke, didn't dramatize. That was the most frightening thing. The complete absence of performed emotion, because real emotion doesn't need to perform. Boudreaux doesn't know anything about Benghazi, but Boudreaux knows that when somebody calls for help, you go. You don't ask what difference it makes. You go. That's not a political principle. That's a human one. He stopped, looked down at his hands. The hands that had held glasses, cleaned lenses, tapped tables, turned pages for 20 minutes. Now they just rested on the table, still, like the hands of a man in prayer. Tyrone Woods had 2 children. Sean Smith had 3. Chris Stevens never got the chance to start a family. Glenn Doherty had a daughter he called by a nickname over Skype every night from Libya. Kennedy spoke these details like reading a list of friends, because to him they were not friends had met, but friends had served alongside. And in Louisiana, serving the same country means friendship, even between people who never shook hands. And you sat before a committee and asked, what difference, at this point, does it make? What difference does it make? He repeated the phrase the second time, not for emphasis, but to let the sentence weigh itself. Clinton looked away, not at Kennedy, not at her aide, not at the camera, away toward the wall, toward nothing. The way 4 witnesses before her had looked away when they heard the names of the fallen. Patel read names in the Schiff hearing. Vance read names in the hearing before this one. Now Kennedy. And each time, the witness looked away, as if the names of the lost had weight. And that weight pulled the listener's eyes toward a place that was not the camera, not the microphone, but somewhere only a person who knew they were guilty ever looked. Kennedy stood up. For 25 minutes, he had sat, leaned back, cleaned glasses, told stories. Now he stood, and his height, taller than most people expected from watching him on TV, filled the space between the senator's bench and the witness table like an afternoon shadow. He removed his glasses last time. Didn't clean them, just held them in his right hand, the frames catching light from the hearing room fixtures. First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State, 2-time presidential candidate. He read the resume like a eulogy, not for a person who had passed, but for an ambition that had. The most impressive resume of anyone who has ever lost. Twice, 33,000 deleted emails. $4.4 billion and 6 homes. 4 fallen Americans, and what difference does it make? A dossier you funded that led to the biggest surveillance scandal in FBI history. A podcast where you called a combat veteran a Russian asset. And a book where you blamed 24 people for your loss. And none of them were you. He set his glasses on the table, gently, like laying a flower on a final resting place. Would you like to respond? Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. Clinton opened her mouth. And here, at this precise moment, everything she'd ever learned in 30 years of politics surged forward. Spine straightened, chin lifted, voice found. The Secretary of State registered the tone she used when speaking to Putin through interpreters. The tone that said, "I've seen worse than you, Senator." The threats to our democracy. Kennedy raised his hand, gently, not angry, not rushed. Just raised it palm out, like a traffic cop saying, "Not this way, Madam Secretary." His voice was soft, almost gentle. "I didn't ask about democracy. I asked about the bait." Clinton stopped. Her mouth still open, not fully open, parted in the state between speech and silence, between pivot and void. And this was the moment the pivot failed. Not the way Vance had blocked the pivot by locking the destination there. Clinton couldn't pivot because there was nowhere to go. Here, it was different. Here, Clinton couldn't pivot because Kennedy had turned the entire hearing into a story. And you can't pivot out of someone else's story. You can only be a character in it. Clinton was a character in Kennedy's fishing story, and characters don't write the script. Madam Secretary, you've been blaming other people for 30 years. For 30 years, every scandal has been somebody else's fault. The emails were a setup. The election was Russia's fault. Benghazi was a Republican witch hunt. Haiti was misinformation. Tulsi was a Russian asset. Kennedy looked at Clinton, and in his eyes, behind the folksy, behind Boudreaux, behind the honey and the hook, there was something no one expected. Pity. Not faked, not tactical, real pity. The kind a man feels when he watches someone trapped in a snare they set themselves and walked into themselves every day for 30 years. Boudreaux lost a fishing tournament once, dead last. Out of 47 fishermen, Boudreaux caught the fewest catfish. You know what Boudreaux said when he got home? Silence. The hearing room held its breath. Not a metaphor, actually held its breath, the kind of breath holding you can hear, because the absence of sound is louder than any sound. My bait was bad. Kennedy let those 4 words hang in the air. 4 words, 4 syllables. My bait was bad. Light as a breath, heavy as a boulder. That's it. 4 words. My bait was bad. He didn't blame Russia. He didn't blame the weather. He didn't write a book about it. He changed his bait and won the tournament the next year. Kennedy picked up his glasses. Put them back on. Slow. Last time. You've never changed your bait, Madam Secretary. In 30 years, you've never once looked at the results and said, "My bait was bad, and that's why you keep losing." Clinton opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it, like a fish, and that thought, that brutal coincidence, crossed the mind of everyone in the room. But no one said it out loud. She looked like a fish on the bank, mouth opening and closing, searching for water. And in the gallery, a woman in the second row, a staffer, nobody important, someone who had been to 200 hearings and had never once been affected by any of them, put her hand over her heart. Not because she agreed with Kennedy, not because she disagreed with Clinton, because she had just watched a 7, 8, year-old woman reach for the one move she had used her entire life, the pivot, the redirect, the let me reframe the question. And for the first time in 40 years, the move didn't work. And watching someone's lifelong weapon fail them is not politics. It's watching someone get old. 5 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. Kennedy, softly, almost whispering. The microphone had to amplify it, and the whisper, through the hearing room's PA system, sounded like a prayer. Change the bait, Madam Secretary. It's not too late. Even Boudreaux would tell you that. He stood, stepped away from the bench, didn't look back, didn't wait for an answer, didn't need one. Boudreaux doesn't wait for a bite when he knows the pond's been fished out. Behind him, the gallery, which had laughed, held its breath, gone silent, now applauded. Not applause, like praise. Applause, like exhaling. Like when you've held your breath too long, and the release sounds like clapping, and mixed in with the applause. Quiet, just beneath it, like an undertow laughter. Not comedy laughter. The laughter of something rarer than humor truth. The kind of truth you recognize not because someone proved it, but because someone told it through a story about a fisherman named Boudreaux. And that story was truer than 400 pages of memoir. Last image, Hillary Clinton at the witness table. Water glass half empty, glasses slightly askew, for the first time all day. Her aide still turning pages, though there were no more pages to turn. What happened still open on the table. Yellow tab facing the ceiling. 24 reasons pointing upward. The woman who blamed everybody, alone in a room where a catfish farmer from Louisiana just told a truer story than any shed told in 40 years. The first clip went online before Kennedy reached the hallway. Most impressive resume of anyone who has ever lost twice. 12 million views in 6 hours. Fox News ran the clip 14 times during the evening lineup. CNN ran it 9 times, with a 4-person panel debating whether it was sexist. That panel became a viral clip in its own right, because one of the 4, a former Clinton advisor, started the sentence, "Senator Kennedy is," then stopped, looked down at the desk, and said, "Has not wrong." Clip number 2. What? Like with a cloth. The Kennedy version. Unlike the original 2015 clip, where Clinton laughed and deflected, this version featured Kennedy reading the quote back in a voice flat as a frozen lake. And the contrast between Clinton's original smile and Kennedy's dead seriousness created the effect that social media called the mirror. He reflected her words back at her, but the mirror didn't smile. Clip number 3. $4,000. Catfish pond versus $4.4 billion. Haiti. Twitter's favorite. Homemade comparison graphics appeared within the hour. Boudreaux's catfish pond became a meme. Someone made Boudreaux has better ROI than the Clinton Foundation t-shirts and sold 40,000 inches 2 days. Clip number 4. I'm not going to make a joke here. This was the most shared clip on Facebook. The platform of the older generation. The generation that remembers Benghazi. The generation that remembers 13 hours. Kennedy's tonal shift from comedy to silence created an effect that no punchline could. It made people cry. And people share the things that make them cry more than the things that make them laugh, because laughter is a reaction, and crying is a connection. But the most viral clip? The clip everyone remembered? The clip quoted in comment sections, printed on signs, written on hats, was the last one. My bait was bad. 4 words from Boudreaux, the 2 words of accountability that Clinton had never spoken in 40 years of public life. The clip wasn't long, under 2 minutes, from the moment Kennedy told the fishing tournament story to the moment he said, "Change the bait." But it spread like wildfire in Louisiana dry season. Because it was simple enough for a 10-year old. To understand when you lose, you look at your bait before you blame the fish. My bait was bad joined fish ain't biting from the Schiff hearing, both from Boudreaux, both from Kennedy, and both using fishing to say what political language was too complicated to say. The truth is simple. Legal consequences. The DOJ email investigation, which had slowed to a crawl under the Biden years, reignited after Grassley's discovery of the unread thumb drives. A federal judge signed an order requiring the FBI to produce a complete inventory of unexamined devices within 30 days. Clinton's lawyers called it a political witch hunt. Nobody was impressed by that phrase anymore. DOJ expanded the Haiti audit from random sampling to a comprehensive audit of every contract linked to FOB, WJCV IP designations. Elon Musk tweeted $4.4 billion, 6 houses. Somebody checked the receipts. The tweet received 89 million views. Change the bait became a political advice meme. Every time a politician blamed circumstances instead of themselves, the comment sections flooded. Change the bait. Simple, brutal, and correct. Clinton didn't retire. She never retires. That was part of the problem, part of the tragedy, part of the reason Kennedy looked at her with pity instead of contempt. A person who knows when to stop doesn't need anyone's sympathy. A person who doesn't know when to stop, that's tragedy. But her speaking fees, once $250,000 per event, once enough to buy a house in most states, dropped to near zero. Not because she'd run out of things to say, because people had run out of money they were willing to pay to hear her blame. The week after the hearing, a political organization in New York canceled a fundraiser where Clinton was the keynote speaker. Official reason: scheduling conflict. Real reason: according to 3 sources on the planning committee, nobody wanted to buy a ticket to sit in the same room with the woman who just got asked about the cloth for the millionth time. Tickets sold 47 out of 500 seats. Ticket price $1,000. Total revenue $47,000. Less than Boudreaux earned from Catfish last year, if you count the income from his wife Mari's jam sales at the farmer's market. What Happened, which had gone out of print after its 3rd run, unexpectedly returned to the Amazon top 10, but not because of Clinton, because of Kennedy. People bought the book to count whether there really were 24 reasons. Many counted 26. 2 additional reasons Kennedy hadn't mentioned: Facebook's algorithm and pressure from the field. The burn movement, 26 reasons. Still no, my bait was bad. Hank Thibodeau sat on the dock. Same dock, same plastic chair, same phone propped against the bait bucket. The way Hank watched C-SPAN, the only way Hank watched anything on a phone, because Hank believed that holding a phone in your hand while fishing was a sign of societal decay. 2 stories in 1 month. First Schiff, now Clinton. Has using me up, Hank said to no one, or maybe to the catfish beneath the dock. The kind of fish that had grown so accustomed to Hank's voice that they drifted close when he spoke, like dogs approaching the sound of a can opener. Kennedy told the fishing tournament story. Boudreaux, dead last. My bait was bad. Hank stopped. His hand on the fishing rod went slack. Because Hank had lost a fishing tournament, 1,997 came in 38th out of 47. And he did say, my bait was bad. And he did change his bait. And he did win the next year. Hank remembered that day more clearly than his wedding, not because he loved fishing more than Marie, but because the wedding was a happy day, and happy days pass quickly, while days of humiliation carved themselves into bone. In 1997, the annual Bro Bridge fishing tournament, Hank came in 38th out of 47. He used river shrimp bait, the bait his father used, his grandfather used, the whole Thibodeau line had used, since there had been fishing in Louisiana. River shrimp bait was tradition. River shrimp bait was honor. And river shrimp bait in 1997 was a disaster. I came home, sat right here, Hank told Marie. Though Marie had heard this story, she'd counted 273 times. I looked at the bait bucket. I looked at the rod. I said, "My bait was bad." 2 words. Done. The next year, Hank switched to red worms, the kind his father would have called traitor bait, and won the tournament. Not first place, third. But from 38th to 3rd is from shame to glory. And Hank knew that 2 words, "My bait was bad," had carried him from the bottom of the pond to the bank. And now, Kennedy was telling that story on TV, in front of Hillary Clinton, on national television. "Marie," he called toward the house. "Marie, Marie Thibodeau," the woman who had endured 42 years of Hank's fishing stories, who had cooked 11,000 dinners without complaint, except for the time Hank brought a live fish into the kitchen without cleaning it first. "The fish needs to breathe, Marie. The fish needs to breathe outside." "Hank." Marie stepped onto the back porch. "What?" "He told my story on national TV." Hank pointed at the phone, though Marie was too far away to see. "The fishing tournament, 97. He was there. Marie. He was at the weigh-in." "I didn't know," he remembered. Marie looked at Hank, the look of a woman who had known everything there was to know about her husband since 1983 and was no longer surprised by anything except his ability to still find something new to get excited about. "Honey, that man remembers everything. That's what makes him dangerous." Hank looked at the pond. The catfish were surfacing in the afternoon when the light went slant. They liked to come up, and Hank liked to watch them. Not to catch, just to watch, because after 40 years of fishing, Hank had learned that sometimes watching fish swim is more fun than catching them. "Marie, you know the difference between me and that Clinton woman?" Marie didn't answer. Didn't need to answer. She knew Hank would answer himself. 42 years. "I changed my bait. She's still using the same worm she used in 2016. Hank reeled in his line. Slow, steady. The sound of a reel turning in a Louisiana afternoon. Click, click, click. Was the kind of sound no microphone could capture because it wasn't a sound. It was time. Time turning on a spool, slow and steady. The way a man in Bro Bridge lives, slow and steady, and when the bait's bad, you change the bait. Teresa Morales washed trays in the cafeteria kitchen at Medical Center Little Rock, Arkansas, the city where Hillary Clinton was once the First Lady of the state, before she became the First Lady of the nation, 6:47 p.m. The afternoon shift was almost over. A small TV on the kitchen shelf, the TV that management said couldn't be on, but everyone kept on because management left at 5, was playing the Kennedy clip. Teresa was 55, Mexican-American. She arrived in Little Rock in 1991, the same year the Clintons left for Washington. She had lived in Clinton City longer than Clinton had lived there. "She came from here," Teresa said to Dolores, the co-worker wiping tables. "She left. She never came back except to campaign. I stayed. I work here. I raised 3 kids here. I buried my husband here." Dolores nodded. Dolores didn't say much, not because she had nothing to say, but because Dolores had worked a hospital cafeteria long enough to know that sometimes listening was the most important part of the job. "On the TV," Kennedy said, "you've been blaming other people for 30 years. Teresa nodded hard, the nod of a woman who had just heard someone say the thing she'd been thinking for years. "That's what I told my daughter when she lost her softball game," Teresa said, her hands still washing trays, because Teresa's hands never stopped working, even when her mouth was talking, even when her eyes were watching TV. Because that's how you raise 3 kids alone in a city that the powerful left behind. Don't blame the umpire. Fix your swing. She was 12. She understood. Teresa's daughter, Maria Elena, now 24, nursing school at UAMS, same hospital where Teresa washed trays, had lost a softball game in 7th grade. Came home crying, said the umpire was blind, said the pitcher cheated, said the field was muddy. Teresa listened to every excuse. Then she said 7 words that Maria Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Don't blame the umpire. Fix your swing. Maria Elena fixed her swing. Made varsity. Got a partial scholarship. And every time someone asked Maria Elena how she got to nursing school, she said, "My mom told me to fix my swing." That was accountability. 7 words from a cafeteria worker who never went to college, who never held office, who never wrote a book. 7 words that did more than 400 pages of what happened. Teresa set the tray on the rack, wiped her hands on her apron. Hillary Clinton is 78. She still doesn't understand. Dolores looked at Teresa, then at the TV, then back at Teresa. You know what? Dolores said, the longest sentence Dolores had spoken all week. I think she does understand. She just won't admit it. Teresa thought about that. Thought about it while turning off the faucet. Thought about it while hanging up her apron. Thought about it while walking out to the parking lot where her 2009 Honda Civic, the car she bought after her husband passed, the first car she'd ever bought herself, paid for herself, driven herself, was waiting beneath an oak tree. Maybe, Teresa said, opening the car door. But the result is the same. Whether you don't understand, or you won't admit it, the bait's still bad, and the fish still aren't biting. She drove home down President Clinton Avenue, the road named for the 42nd president, the road she drove every day, twice, for 34 years. The road didn't know her. The road didn't know her 3 children. The road only knew the name on the sign, the name of the person who had left and never truly come back. Teresa turned right, red light, stopped, looked at the street sign in her rearview mirror, drove on. She called him a carnival barker. He asked about the cloth. She called half of America deplorable. He introduced them to Boudreaux. God bless Hank Thibodeau and the fishing tournament of 1997, because the man who changed his bait taught America more about accountability than 40 years of Clinton press conferences. God bless Teresa Morales, and every woman who stayed in the town the powerful left behind. And God bless Boudreaux, whose bait was bad once, who admitted it, and who won the next year. 24 excuses, 33,000 deleted emails, $4.4 billion, and 6 homes, 4 fallen Americans, 2 lost elections, and 1 catfish farmer who said 4 words she never could. My bait was bad. 40 years. 40 years of the most impressive resume in American political history. 40 years of everything except the 2 words that would have made everything else unnecessary. My fault. Change the bait, Madam Secretary.